Okay, so we have those on our UCI now. We still have a few more room controls that we want to give our end users, so let's jump back into the schematic. And just below the lighting controls, we have our shades. In this case, instead of using command buttons or a plugin or a user component, we're going to be using GPIO.
Pause. What, for the viewers out there, is GPIO?
Good question. GPIO stands for General Purpose Inputs and Outputs. You know, we're talking about all the different ways you can control third-party devices. You know, you start with plugins, then you kind of move down to command buttons, and then at this point, we're literally just talking about copper connections, right? Literal wires going in for something like just a basic button that's on the wall, a potentiometer, a closed contact coming in, maybe like of a sensor, a magnetic sensor for when a door closes. These really, really basic components that just come in as a wire. That is what GPIO are for. Most of our devices have GPIO on them. In this case, we could actually use, we also have the QIO LVR4, the relay device. That could be used for this shades control as well, very similar concept. Ultimately, you know, in this case, we're looking at the Shades API. It's going to tell us sort of what it needs. It's looking for 2 relays that need to be on or off for X number of seconds. We're sending that not via an audio analog output, but a control analog output out using GPIO. And the way it's describing itself, that means that we're going to need momentary buttons for this, yeah?
I can grab that with the custom control, and I can give myself 2 momentary buttons. And then I will send these through the emulator, the relay up to, and the relay down to, and then the relay up from, and the relay down from. Okay. Now I can grab these 2 buttons, throw them on my UCI.
You know, and while you build that out, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, again, we've been kind of building this UCI rather quickly for the sake of the video, but it is always a good idea to spend time on your UCIs, really think about the placement of the buttons, the size of the buttons, the consistency of the sizes of the buttons, all of these sorts of things. This is something that is in many ways kind of frustrating for us because the end user thinks that UCI is Q-SYS. That's their only context for what Q-SYS is. And we, as a manufacturer, have no control of that whatsoever. We rely entirely on you to represent us by putting together a slick, smooth, intuitive UCI.
So if you would like our children to continue to eat, please take some time with that UCI. And you know what? I sound like a masochist, but it is fun after you get the hang of it.
To starve your children? That is a very masochistic thing to say.
Well,
it's a weird thing to say is fun.
Just saying, UCIs can be fun.
But just Patrick's not going to starve his kids if you build a bad UCI. Just don't let that weigh on your soul. Hopefully.
Now we have the lights on. Let's see them fade down to the lowest setting. Great. I can set it at that medium setting, bring it all the way up, or I can have them turn off entirely. All right, now that window over there, that's open. Let's see what we can do with the shade controls. If I hold this momentary button down, we'll see those shades start to lower bit by bit. And then if I hold the open shades, it will raise back up. Perfect.
Hey, Jacob. Yeah. I went and I did a little extra on this one. So if we look at the shade control methodology pop-up, it tells us that this particular shade controller wants to have its relays turned on for 2 seconds in order for the shades to come up and down, right? And so far what we've done is we've given the users some buttons on the UCI that would force them to hold that button down for 2 seconds and up for 2 seconds. Now that's fine if that's, you know, a fundamentals class, but I happen to know the intermediates teacher, and I'm coming your way soon. I want to give my users even more ease of use. I know that people in this room aren't going to know to press that button down for 2 seconds because they're people, and people are made of people, and people are the worst. I want to give them a button that's even easier. So I want a single button. They tap it once, and it'll go down regardless of whether or not they've held it down for 2 seconds. So the question is, how can we outthink the peopleness of people by giving them something that will do what the machine wants rather than force the user to hold the button down? So on my design, I took those momentary buttons and I fed them through a control delay. And that control delay has 2 outputs. First thing it does is it goes out the first output immediately after 0 milliseconds, but then it waits 2 seconds before it goes out the second one. And what is it doing? Well, it's controlling a flip-flop. It's turning the flip-flop on or off. Why am I doing that? Because a flip-flop out gives me that true or false state that I want to use to drive the GPIO. So that means that when I hit that momentary button, even if I only tap it for a half a second, or if I do hold it for 2 seconds, doesn't matter, but however long I tap it, it'll turn the flip-flop on immediately, and then 2 seconds later, it'll turn it off by resetting it. And I've then wired that to my relay. So that means that here I can just tap this momentary button once really quickly, and the shades will start to go down, and they'll go all the way down to their set limit point because the flip-flop is taking care of keeping it on long enough for it to happen. I go back, I do the same thing with the up button, tap it briefly, and the shades will rise for the same mentality. So sometimes you can use these control components to outthink your way around a problem because the devices in the room may not play as nicely as you want them to, and you wish that they would based on the components that we have inside Q-SYS.
Well, taking a look at what we have now, that's everything for the online portion of the class. We're all set. So that means that you're ready for the in-person version of the class. What you're going to do now is make sure that you save the design that you've been working on, along with me on, and take that with you. Go to the live version classroom page and register for any of the available options that work for you, and then go on that day, bring this design, and we'll finish it there in class and be able to answer any questions you might have there as well. So maybe I will see you there. Thank you so much for joining me. See you next time.